Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of 1+1, your place for inconvenient truth-telling and myth-busting. And today we are joined by Elaina Porter, of the Pendo Center for Human Rights and Self-Determination. We're going to be we're going to be talking about African American affairs. What is the way forward for the movement of Black lives? And her organization has a much more radical take in the way forward. And I'm honored that she's our guest. So first of all, Elaina, welcome to 1+1.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's an Yes, it's an honor to have you. And before I get to my first question, first of all, do you want to talk a little bit about your background?
Okay. Well, my background is in education. I was when I got into the movement, I was actually working at an alternative education program located in Athens, Georgia. And I worked in the education field from 2007 until 2019. And working with at-risk youth, I wanted to go into the criminal justice field in order to pursue some type of career where I could write programs and policies to address some of the issues that we have in our communities. African Americans are exposed to a lot of internal and external conflict, internal violence. Specifically, the internal violence is horrendous amongst our youth, and that's because
what they call that awful term, black on black crime.
Yes, and it's fratricide. It's a mental issue due to the oppression. You know, when you have an oppressed group, you know, they feed off of themselves, and that's what we have been doing for decades, feeding off of each other. Most of the crimes that are committed in our cities and in our communities are economic crimes that we commit against each other. And that's what the violence derived from, lack of resources. And it's not to justify what happens, but I'm saying that's the root cause. That is the root cause, lack of resources, the breakdown of the family, and all of that can be contributed to the fact of the matter that we have been traumatized intergeneration for years, from generation to generation to generation, and we've never had any form of restorative justice as a people. The civil rights era during the 60s, it was just basically window dressing. Integration did more harm than good. We've done the studies and we have the proof, we have the statistics to back that up. Our elders and ancestors during the 60s, they held land. We had businesses, we had viable communities and schools. The issue was equity, having things funded, the equal distribution of taxes. We were excluded from our own tax base. So integration was not the answer. We had other options as opposed to integration at that time that would have been a much better option for us as a people.
Very interesting points that you made, and very provocative arguments, if I may say. And we're definitely going to be getting into that, because that's exactly why I wanted to invite you. And well, you know, before, and actually continuing on with what you were saying, then. So before we get specifically into what your organization champions, my first question then is, for people who who don't know this part of history, can you explain Malcolm X's international campaign called We Charge Genocide? What did he hope to achieve with that campaign, and what was the response on the international level to that campaign of his, We Charge Genocide?
Well, I'm happy that you asked that question. What Malcolm X wanted to do, he wanted to internationalize our fight and move it from the domestic arena. Number one, our rights are not judicable here in the United States.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean is the laws and the human rights laws in the international and human rights treaties that are applicable to peoples. There's a distinction between a simple minority and a people. Are judicial. Our rights are not judicable here in the United States because they do not apply the treaties within the justice system here. For example, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights states all peoples have a right to self-determination. That means you have a right to control your identity, to dictate who you are, not be labeled or mislabeled as a simple minority, like we have been mislabeled when we are in fact indigenous to the United States. We were already here, there's documented proof of that. We can't actually go and argue that point here in the United States because they have declarations, understandings, and reservations on the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which they signed, okay? But we can't have it enforced because they have those reservations, declarations, and understandings. Article 27 of that particular convention, it allows us to utilize our cultural rights where it would tie us back to the land and we would be able to assert our land rights, assert our property rights. We would be able to assert our rights to autonomy, but that's not possible here in the United States. And Malcolm X had attorneys. He had one young person that ended up becoming an attorney at that time. His name was Dr. Yusef Naim Clay. And he was my mentor's mentor. And he is the person who he assisted the Dalits. He assisted with the Sami tribe. Dr. Clyde was a real legal eagle. And I wish I could have met him, but I did purchase a lot of his literature. And I just fell in love with his position on rights for encapsulated peoples. And when I say encapsulated, that means the relationship is forced and the relationship is in the Constitution and in the institutions where we have been basically relegated, you know, to a disposable population because we can't assert those rights to autonomy. We can't assert those property rights. You know, we need representation that represent our interests first. And I'm not saying that we don't want to do business with other groups. We don't want to live amongst other groups, but our sovereignty was displaced. Whether our ancestors were enslaved on the continent in 1492 or they were enslaved right here in 1492, our sovereignty was displaced. Our ancestors never gave it up, and nor have or will we. So we have to have this political discussion. And what Malcolm X was trying to do was have that political discussion in a neutral jurisdiction. The United States is an offender, okay? You can't allow the offender to and think that you're going to get justice from a criminal. You don't go to your rapist for counseling. That's a bad move. If someone carjacks you, you don't ask them to politely to give you a ride in your car that they just took. In my view, from my perspective, our leadership has really done a number on us because of their lack of knowledge in international and human rights law and their lack thereof of trying to apply it. And Malcolm X was met with hostility from all directions, even his own, because of his political stance. And I can attest to even my own certain circles I can't go into because I'm quote unquote a separatist, which I'm very offended by that, and I consider that as a another racial hit, because I respect the fact that you have your right to self-determine. In 1776, Euro Americans had that right. I believe here in 2021, we deserve that right to have a plebiscite vote for self-determination as well, if that's what we choose. Now, my organization has already, in 2017, we have already we declared a African descendant nation here in the United States. And in 2018, there was documents filed on our behalf, so we would be able to exercise our right to self-determination. We have also requested for decolonization here in the United States as well. Now, this has not hit mainstream yet because we've been doing a lot of work in the background, working with different organizations, informing our leadership on the ground. And that's one of the things that the Pendo Center for Human Rights and Self-Determination has been doing. We have been really working with grassroots organizations, political figures, just average people who do not know that they have a right as a human being to self-determine. We cannot continue to stay in the political construct that we are in. As a matter of fact, we looked at, I believe it was about maybe 6 months ago on my radio show, we did a threat assessment for people, ethnicities like ours. And we have exceeded we have exceeded all of the factors for another mass atrocity. We've had several mass atrocities. In 1985, the police chief of Philadelphia okayed to drop a bomb on Move. Okay. During Hurricane Katrina, we heard whispers of at least 5,000, mostly Black males, were shot in the back of the head. That's came from a reputable source in Congress. So we have been hit every single year with so many police brutality cases, and the police get a slap on the wrist. It's almost, they have the discretion, to just kill us carte blanche. And, this year, as a response to that, another one of our leaders created a militia to protect, so we could protect ourselves. So we understand now that we're going to have to make some serious political decisions if the next generation is going to survive because of the conditions we're in. These last 4 years with Donald Trump in office, it really showed how vulnerable we are as a people. A lot of violence escalated towards us that hasn't been in the media. For example, in my area in South Georgia, that's only one of the murders that had occurred. It just hit the news. We have sundown towns where there's some counties that you cannot, if you're a Black person, you better not let daylight hit your, dawn hit your back. You better be out of there.
Yeah.
It's that bad. And this is not 1821. This is not 1921. This is 2021. That's how bad it's here. So when Malcolm X tried to internationalize the issue and charge genocide, it is because we meet all of the criteria for genocide. We meet those guidelines. It's just a slow, triaged, institutionalized genocide. When you don't control your own means to treat yourself, your own health care, you leave it up to people who has no problem killing you, oppressing you, since they came in contact with you, that's genocidal. When you have to depend on someone who considers you their sworn enemy to educate your children, to feed your people, to treat and provide health care for your people, and you wonder why we're dying by the droves due to poor health care. Every institution has been weaponized against Black Americans, and we have puppet leadership that co-signs on it.
Yes, and before I get to my next question, uh, what was the response internationally to Malcolm X's "We Charge Genocide" campaign?
It was very interesting, based on my knowledge of this.
Because you mentioned, I know that Malcolm was definitely considered in enfant terrible when it came to when it came to the
Yes.
NAACP.
Yes.
Even Martin Luther King Jr. had a bit of a frosty relationship with Malcolm, although
Yes.
although they both realized that they were kindred spirits. They both just had very different approaches as to how to achieve justice.
And
But but you mentioned that even Malcolm's own entourage, and by that I assume you're meaning the Nation of Islam itself,
Yes.
was also
Yes.
very hostile towards Malcolm. So
Yes.
can you talk about that and the hostility Malcolm received for specifically the the We Charge Genocide campaign?
Well, the hostility that he received from his own people, his own group, they perceived what he was doing as that he was stepping outside the box, that he was showboating. No, that was a legal strategy that all of the oppressed people after World War II, the non-European people, oppressed peoples, back then, you had Vietnam, the Asians, they were fighting for their rights. You had those Latin American countries fighting for their rights, getting the United States out of their backyards. You had Cuba, who said they weren't having it, and it was only 80. Okay, so revolution was on the horizon, and he saw that, and by him having the ability to travel internationally, he became friends with different people who started saying, hey, pulling him to the side, this is what y'all need to do. This integration stuff is not where it's going to be. This is the same rules applied then, they apply now, and they apply to us then. But those people within Malcolm X circle wanted him to stay focused domestically and within the religious realm. They did not want him to step outside of that religious box. They wanted to keep him confined. But with someone with that intellect, the charisma that he had, they could not confine him and keep them to themselves. Malcolm, when he traveled, not all African countries agreed. Some agreed that integration was going to be a better fit. As a matter of fact, I do know for a fact I've spoken with some Africans, and they do still feel that, we should be satisfied with our lot.
Yeah.
And that's not true. They weren't satisfied with it. They fought wars of liberation. They went to the United Nations, and they didn't settle for crumbs. So I find it offensive. I don't think we should settle for it either. Malcolm X, he received so much backlash from his own kind, from other Blacks during the Civil Rights era. You had even Martin Luther King, his route, he did wake up towards the end, but his strategy was off, was very off. It was off. I understand we were in a lose-lose situation militarily, but politically, the strategy that he used was genocidal. And I'm sorry, but that's my position.
I'll respectfully disagree on that, but all right.
And I say that because when you don't control the institutions that you depend on, those institutions can be, and they have been, weaponized against us. Education system, horrible. Policing, horrible. Okay, we don't control it. And if you really take a look at in these areas where most of the police brutality occur, it occurs in areas where we're the majority population.
Yeah.
Okay, and you might have
in both the North and the South. You mean even yes. The places that have the highest rates of a Black population.
Yes. So that tells me that the government is complicit in using violence to keep us in line. It's not to enforce or protect communities or anything like that. It's used as a tool of repression. The judicial system is used as a tool of repression, and the police has been used as a tool of repression. And the United States is complicit in it. They are complicit. What they have gone to other countries to invade and start wars for, they do it right here. And what Malcolm X was doing was going to the world. He was going to the UN and calling on these countries to hold the United States accountable. Hold them up to that mirror. If you say you're about liberation and you're about freedom, then let's start in your own backyard with the people you've taken a dump on for a mighty long time.
Perfect segue then. Perfect segue then to my second question. Is it safe to say that your organization is carrying on that tradition of Malcolm X's "We Charge Genocide"? And how do you respond to the criticisms? You already alluded to it. How do you respond to the criticisms that your organization is a Black separatist and an ultra Black nationalist organization, like the Nation of Islam and so forth? Respond to that, please.
Well, I respond by reminding them that there's what we call international human rights law, and I refer them to several treaties that states emphatically we have a right to self-determination under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 1, the 1960 Decolonization Conventions, the ILO 169, Article 1, Paragraph 1 Convention, that we have a right to self-determination. We have a right, we have land rights, we have property rights, we have a right to autonomy. So I'm sorry, but there's nothing separatist about what I'm saying. This is the law. This is what should have been done. As a matter of fact, is little is known, after slavery, we were treated and we did have a status and protected by the federal government, similar to the Native Americans. But all of those gains, after Lincoln was assassinated, all of those gains was taken away from us. And we were re-enslaved via the 13th Amendment, with the exception clause of the 13th Amendment. and penal colonies, specifically here in the South. That's what happened. So I arm myself.
And actually, sorry to interrupt, but you mentioned the 13th Amendment, and that's actually something that we're going to talk about later on. But the 13th, but the 13th Amendment, yes, the 13th Amendment did end slavery, but anyone who has seen Ava DuVernay's documentary from Netflix called 13th, which talks about mass incarceration and so forth, there is a loophole in the 13th Amendment that says that yes, slavery is illegal, but if you're convicted of a crime, you are a slave to the state, and that is actually where the new what Michelle Alexander calls the new Jim Crow. It takes roots over there, but then of course with the drug war, that made mass incarceration and made the status of black people or indigenous people or Latinos back as I hate that term second class citizen, but back as a people without rights. So I just had to mention that. So continue on with what you were going.
And okay, but gosh, I lost my train of thought because I was getting into that part of the conversation too. But when I encounter someone who refers to me as a separatist or racist or and I have that conversation, I educate them on what the laws are and what the human rights laws are. And we have human rights that have been skirted, even in 1800s. We had the right to return to Africa. Those of us who were from Africa and wanted to go back to the homeland in Africa, and those of us who were enslaved right here, we had a right to return. We had a right to set up a state, or we had a right to set up our own government, or we could have had a vote and voted to decide whether or not we wanted integration. But there was no plebiscite vote. None of those things happened. We were encapsulated without our consent via the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. So our human rights have been circumvented. And that's what I explained. And most of the time when I'm finished with the conversation, people understand because I'm not one to get out here and fist pump, and that's not me. Education. Educating the people about our history, educating people about what our human rights are. And that's how I address those people.
But wait, let me see. But the kind of yeah, because you talk about self-determination. So let's get back to the criticism that you say people tag you with, that they tar and feather you with, black separatist, black nationalism. Which there's nothing wrong with black nationalism, but when people call you a black nationalist, they basically mean, yeah, they basically think like, why are you going down that Nation of Islam, Malcolm X line of black separatism? In other words, so explain to people that so explain how okay, you may say yeah, so first explain, distinguish yourself from the Nation of Islam, at least when it was under Elijah Muhammad's, and why you just don't buy into the criticism that you're a black separatist.
Number one, I respect all religions. Little is it known, I respect all religions. I don't have a certain religion that I subscribe to. I subscribe to all religions. I respect that person's right. However, there's a distinction between my religion and someone's politics. I don't mix the two. That's the difference. That's one of the biggest difference with my organization. Number two,
just like Brother Malcolm towards the end of his life.
That's right. Education. Our leadership, our grassroots activists, they need to be trained in international and human rights law. So many things can be avoided with utilizing and knowing and having a knowledge base in international and human rights law, and knowing how to advocate, when different issues arrive, using the Inter-American Court, the Human Rights Commission, knowing how to communicate and how to draft communications, that will save a lot of people from going to jail. That saves a lot of people from being, exposed to violence in these, in these protests. We seen last year, we had people who were genuinely actually protesting. But then you would have another group come up behind them and throw a rock through the window and looting the joint. And they thought it was all Black people. And it wasn't. Most of the time, it was not us. It was somebody else. So educating the people, upscaling the way that we advocate and we protest, so many things could be solved utilizing technology and having knowledge of the international system, as opposed to hitting the streets. That's one of the things that we try to set aside, because we try to do a lot of education. And I know a lot of people can't afford to take courses or whatever have you. So I have a radio show on Sunday where we talk about land rights. We talk about indigenous status. We talk about minority rights. Last Saturday, we invited the Western Sahara nation to our radio show, and we listened to them and we talked about the legalities of that. That's part of our education. Because we don't want to come across as so divisive that we're not inviting to other people. That's not the Black America that we want.
Yeah.
We want to build a Black America where people can come in our areas, enjoy our culture, enjoy us. If they want to live amongst us, come on, we want you. Black people, especially here in the South, we've never been so vindictive and hateful where we shun other people. That's not in our spirit. We do business with other nationalities. We do good business with the Chinese. Hey, what would we do without Miss Ling Ling's hair? Okay. We Hispanic people, we live amongst them. They live amongst us. We work with them. Very rarely you will hear Black people participate in blatant hate crimes. I'm not going to say it has not happened, but very rarely. We don't want that kind of Black America. What we want is equity, and we want to control the areas where we're the majority population. We want an opportunity to be self-sufficient. We want to control our own institutions, specifically our own criminal justice system. We want to control our education system. We want to control our own political system, because we need representation that answers to us first. We are 45 million strong here in the United States. That's political power. That's economic power. If we're self-sufficient, we take the stressors off of the federal government. So it's not a situation where we don't want to be, have any relations with Native Americans, with Hispanics, with China. That's not where we're going. What we're saying is we're not a disposable population. We have land rights. We have rights to autonomy. We have the right to control our own resources, not have our resources absorbed and misappropriated, and where we're at the bottom of the barrel on the receiving end of our own tax dollars. There has been cases like up in Loudoun County, Alabama, where the selective annexing and underbounding was so bad in those areas. The people they were living basically in third world conditions, had hookworms, okay, from raw sewage. What kind of life is that? And this didn't happen in 1920. It didn't happen in 1919. This is recent. So The only way to close those gaps is control, self-determination. We have to take control of our lives, our destiny. We need something that we can build. So in these areas where we're the majority population, we're looking at controlling those areas. We declared a free association nation. That in itself shows that we're not trying to be adversarial to the United States. We understand that we have to respect their territorial integrity, just like we want them to respect ours.
As a nation to nation.
As a nation to nation, with the exception of the external sovereignty due to the military. We just can't be friends with people who's not friends with the United States. We have to remain neutral. So we understand that.
I think you sort of already answered one of the question, the next question. But if you want to answer it again,
Okay.
Go right ahead. Which is, now if the international if the international community granted the kind of self-determination your organization advocates, what would America look like? On the map, geography, and how would you accommodate Native Americans, Indigenous Americans, and the broad, diverse Latino community? Where would they fit in this hypothetical post-colonial America, which which the people of African descendants, which you speak of, would take the reins of power.
Well, let's take a look at our relationship with the Hispanic group. I have a Mexican brother-in-law, so we've always intermingled, specifically here in the South. So nothing would change. The only thing would change would be the administration of those areas. And what I'm saying, and I'm not saying that they want to run for mayor, they'll have that opportunity. But if we're the majority population, and we're going to talk about reparations as well before we end the show, but if we're the majority population, we want to control that area because it's our tax dollars that's keeping it going. We just don't want our resources being misabsorbed and misappropriated, and by the time it gets to us, there is nothing. And I'm being honest. So I'm not saying we don't want to share with those other groups. I'm saying we need to take care of our home first, and whatever surplus we have, we'll distribute it. It doesn't matter with us. We want them, especially our Hispanic population. We want to be partners with them in agribusiness. We want to set up. We don't want a relationship with them where they're feeling like they're coming in under us. We want to partner with the Native Americans, set up markets in agribusiness, maybe growing hemp to build buildings for building materials, setting up different, doing technology transfers, and going into certain businesses together. In some areas, there may be a water shortage. Maybe we can do something here in the South to help with the water shortage up in Nevada and in those different areas out in Arizona, because the Native Americans, they could use an upgrade too, that we can create two internal markets where we're intercoursing amongst each other, right? That takes the burden off of who? The federal government. So it's a win-win situation if we get the right economists to come in and assist. And this is where we're going to be reaching out to UNCTAD, different UN agencies, so we can get those economists in who can come in and do the research or assist us with the research where we can present this strategy to the United States. It's nothing that we want to come in and overthrow. And when we look at our national liberation movement, we're basing our national liberation movement off the 21st century. We're not looking backwards at what they did in the 1960s.
Okay.
Because we're in a different theater. different political situation, different theater. So it would be suicide for us to try any of that. And I'll be the first to say that. Now, not to say that we won't protect ourselves if we have to, but that's not the route we're trying to go. We're trying to be diplomatic, and we want to use the political route because it has, we have seen the political route. The Tamils had to eventually use the political route. The Sami people have been using it, the Dalits. So we are the Johnny come latelys because we lack knowledge in international and human rights law.
Two quick follow-ups before I get to my next question about Indigenous Americans. Now, Indigenous Americans are overrepresented in prison. They have the highest rates of suicide, alcoholism, intergenerational trauma, the kind of intergenerational trauma that you described that Black people and descendants and Black people descendants of slaves have, and they've been dispossessed of their lands. Now, in indigenous minority, and unfortunately, indigenous people are always going to be a minority in North America. So under an African, descendant, nation, that achieves, that achieves self-determination. How would you, because how would the do you think that the Native Americans would fare much better under under a new nation led by our people compared to
no. This is and I'm so glad this is my findings with the Native Americans. The Native Americans, most of them are still operating off of those treaties from the 1800s where they were signed with an X. They need to start with those treaties. They are not in 1808. They're in 2021. They need to utilize the international human rights law to circumvent the plenary power, the illegal plenary power that the United States have over them. The Native Americans are basically squatters on their own land. That's why I am adamantly opposed to using the domestic route, because we can see how the United States has treated them. Now, there's one nation in Washington, D.C., who is faring very well, called the Lumi tribe. So I would suggest that the Native Americans look at the processes and the procedures that the Lumi tribe use and establish an upgraded treaty or compact using international and human rights law. They are a free association nation right there in Washington, D.C. They control their little spot. They're okay. They're doing quite well. So maybe they could model themselves. No, the Native Americans don't have to come under us. However, I would love to establish some treaties with them and confederate with them. And we set up some markets and hey, we set up some trade and we do technology transfers and maybe we come up with some new ways of doing some farming and just having a whole exchange, nation to nation relationship. We don't want anyone falling under our wing. We want everybody to come in because Africans, based on my research, our ancestors fared well as when they used the political construct as a federation. So we're naturally group collective people. So I don't see us being over Native Americans. I see us working with and partnering with Native Americans. I don't want to be over the Mexicans. I want to partner with the Hispanic and Latino people.
Interesting response. That's a very interesting response.
What you thought I was going to say? Black. I do say that. But however, I'm realistic. We are in the 21st century and every group has something to offer. Okay. pluralism, embracing that group, their identity, what they have to bring to the table. That's what the new America is going to look like. Now, will it be similar to the Soviet Union? No, it doesn't have to be that way because we were naturally a republic. Okay? So there's a lot of political configurations. We can really get creative and do where everybody can be happy. And I know it's not going to be this great big old utopia, but we can see a future if we look towards this white supremacist construct that we have in place. It must be torn down.
Yeah.
It has to be reconstructed. It's unacceptable that the Native Americans are suffering. It's very unacceptable. It's unacceptable that they're committing suicide. It's unacceptable. And the women, Native American women, are being murdered in droves as well. And no one is speaking on that. No one. So we have to partner with the Native Americans. We're going to have a conversation with them about reparations too, because some of those tribes had slaves. But do we want them to give us millions of dollars? No. Reparations mean repair. That means we need to come to the table and have a conversation and say, you know what? You've been suffering. I'm suffering. Let's come together. Let's regroup. You've got so much human capital. Why waste it in alcohol? Like here, Black Americans, we have this generation now. My generation, people were exposed to crack. Now you have heroin back on the scene. So many young mothers are losing their children because they're out in the streets and doing drugs, and it's so much going on right now. And I had an opportunity to see these things firsthand because I worked in the education system and I worked with those children. So it's unacceptable that our Native Americans, brothers and sisters, are going through what they're going through. And we need to build a relationship with them, start having some conversations about repairing ourselves as a whole. We've got to repair ourselves internally. The Native Americans have to repair themselves internally. Yes, they've got a few dollars here and there, but they're still squatters on their own land. They have so much oil in North Dakota, they can't even tap that oil. They don't benefit off of it. Mm-hmm. They don't control what's under their feet. They have to come back to the table and tell the United States that my ancestor, that ain't gonna go right now. I know my ABCs and I know how to read and write. So this treaty, according to the Vienna Conventions, that's what they're going to have to do. And those are the conversations they're going to have. And I don't mind having a conversation with them.
Interesting. Now, off to another topic. I wanted to ask you before we. You mentioned you want to actually talk about reparations. So that actually wasn't a question I was going to ask, but yeah, we're definitely going to talk about that. So off to another topic I wanted to ask you is are many in the Black community and allies to the racial social justice movement, have they been calling for an end to the drug war and amending the Constitution where we get rid of that loophole of the 13th Amendment, which continues slavery the moment you're incarcerated for a crime? Because even with, and the reason why I asked that is because even with all of the calls of defunding the police and all of the solidarity protests that happen amongst the white community in America and globally when people were shouting Black Lives Matter after the state murder of George Floyd, I still don't hear when people talk about, ending mass incarceration and defunding the police, calls to end the drug wars and to try to amend the Constitution where we get rid of that loophole. And now, in your organization and some of your allies, are there are there talks of people that are there talks amongst people to end the drug war and to change that part of the Constitution, or even many parts of the Constitution, which also does need a huge update?
Yes. Well, let me address the part with the abolitionist movement. There is a modern abolitionist movement, a brother by the name of Max Prather, and I will share his information with you. He was doing a weekly show, and he was very active in that movement. And also, he assists with prison rights as well. Now, we have not partnered on anything yet, but he is one of my go-to people if I need any information concerning, prisoners' rights, mass incarceration. So we do have those conversations. But my outlook on dealing with the policing issue is a little bit different. Where we're the majority population, we want your people out. If we're 70% of the population, then more than 6 police officers need to be Black. So we want a transfer of authority and a transfer of police power. So in our areas, protected areas where we are the majority population, whether it be in Detroit, whether it's in Chicago, whether it's in Oklahoma, because that's our home, we're looking at making the all Black towns part of a internal repatriation movement, where we do a population transfers or whatever have you in those protected areas that fall under our jurisdiction. We won't have that problem because, number one, we would use the international standards of policing where the use of force is proportional to the crime. And all of our police would be trained according to international standards because we are what you call a special population. So the policing is not going to look like the policing that you see in Israel or wherever have you now. There's a distinct type of policing that traumatized or oppressed groups have once they're coming out of war-torn situations. And based on my research, the trauma that we've been exposed to, internal violence, external violence, is we're the equivalent of a war-torn country. So our policing is not going to look the same. We will be using restorative justice measures. We won't
is that what Glenn Ford of Black Agenda Report calls community control over the police?
Yes. It would be something similar.
Can you explain to the audience what that means, community control over the police? Because Margaret Kimberly of Black Agenda Reports and the Black Alliance for Peace, I've had her on the show 3 times, and I was listening to an interview with her on Mintcast, part of Mint Press News, and she says she's actually not for this blanket call of defunding the police.
No, and I'm not either.
Yeah, so can you explain what community control over the police and how your organization would approach that?
Well, the way that my organization would approach that, and I've had the opportunity to look at different programs that might work. One approach is that we have to look at the calls for service. And I had an opportunity when I was working on my master's. I wrote my thesis on police brutality. And most of the calls for service for law enforcement in our communities are for social cause. We have mental illness that our police have to deal with, dysfunctional families, domestic violence. We have our youth who are out of control, and parents can't control their youth. And when they can't control their youth, they're calling the police. The police should not be responsible for parenting. Now, the way I see it, the policing that I see us doing is that we have within our department trained police who deal specifically with that issue. But I would not have my officers coming fresh out of a gunfight to to deal with a domestic situation that involves a 9-year-old. That's an issue.
Or somebody going through a bout of mental illness.
Yes, yes. So we would have special police or a special section that deals specifically with that issue, or police officers who choose to train or specialize in that. Yeah, but I wouldn't have them wearing uniforms. They would be plain clothes, because that would relax the situation, and I would have those who deal with those issues on a regular basis. They would have the opportunity to live in the communities that they serve free of charge. That would make them, feel like they're part of something, that they have a stake in the people that they serve. The police now, they don't have a stake in our communities. They don't have a responsibility in our communities, and they don't have a connection with our people. We're dehumanized in their eyes. We're dehumanized in the training that they get. So we're just going to have to, it's a big education piece that's going to have to really go into the policing aspect, even when we take it, even when we control it, because we have trauma. Our communities are traumatized. We've been hit by drugs, 2 or 3 waves of drugs. We've been hit by 2 waves of crack. We've been hit by 3 or 4 waves of heroin and every other drug, pharmaceuticals, abuse, drug abuse. We're going to have internal discussions on how we're going to deal with that. And our police are overwhelmed with these social problems. So when it's time to come up for a real crime, they've been through hell already, dealing with social ills. We're going to have to distinguish what we want our police to do. Are they going to protect and serve, or are they going to be social workers? So
it would be much better if it was the latter, though.
Yeah, it would be much better, but we can't expect them to come off the street from maybe a bank robbery and put on their social work hat, so to speak. So we have a lot of discussions that we need to have internally on how our policing is going to look, because we don't want to trade in.
But you do. Continue.
We don't want to trade in one oppressive regime for another one, just except it looks like us. I think we could be very creative and structure the policing where it could benefit everybody.
But you do think, but you do think, and I think your organization would agree with me when I say that we do need to end the drug war. If we want to end mass incarceration on Black people, we need to end that neo-Dickensian, that new Jim Crow racist drug war, right?
Yes, hands down. And we have 2 approaches that we can take, and we're going to take an approach, a domestic approach. We're going to try to go through Congress and put some things on the table, and we're going to give them a specific amount of time to come to the table. And if we can't get our grievances addressed domestically, then we're prepared to take it to an international jurisdiction. We're not prepared to do anything violent. We're not calling for violence, but we are calling for talks, so we can end this conflict. The conflict has gone on for 4 centuries, and it's not getting better. America is not safe for anyone, but specifically for us. And we're going to have some serious internal discussions as a nation. When Black people are going to have those discussions as a people.
You want to talk about reparations. What does reparations mean to you? And does we talked a lot about all of the different intergenerational traumas that Black people have faced, and and of course, we can't talk about the drug war. You mentioned the crack epidemic, and now this new epidemic of heroin, which I wasn't aware of, which
Yes.
is affecting the Black community. And anyone who has seen this program knows that I've talked, that guests of mine have talked about the Iran Contras. And so we know, and I recently was watching, documentaries and reading books about, Reagan and, and the drug war, and the U.S. It was the U.S. government itself which brought the crack, flooded those into the streets, which Gary Webb and the late Robert Perry exposed. So when we talk about reparations, I think no doubt that the drug ending the drug war is part of it. But what does what does reparations mean to you? Because it sounds to me as if you're not talking about, hey, you need to pay us for all those, for the slavery and for the apartheid you subjected us to, but also for destroying our communities with the drug war and so forth. So, what does reparations look to you?
Reparations is going to look like this for us. Number one, liberty. Liberating us. The relationship is forced. There was no plebiscite vote. We didn't vote for integration. It was forced on us. We didn't vote for Jim Crow. It was forced on us. And as a result of integration, the current policy, our resources, our human capital, our labor, even our land and our property has been absorbed and misappropriated. And that's going to lay the basis of our struggle for reparations. Also, the fact of the matter is that we were here we were already here, and they chose to treat us like we swam beside the Mayflower when we didn't, when we should have enjoyed the same status as the Native Americans, because we have a historical connection to the United States that predates Europeans. That's fact. It's documented. So reparations is not going to be exactly based on what happened in the cotton fields of 1789 and 1803. We're going to deal with the modern harms that has kept us relegated to a disposable population. So reparations is going to look like this: recognition of our free association nation, confederated nation. We want rights to the sea, rights to and above the sea, so we can establish trade and be self-sufficient, with the exception of negotiated external sovereignty. So we will remain neutral with whatever enemies the United States have. We want compensation. We want guarantees of non-repetition, guarantees of non-repetition, that they don't do the harm again. We want a treaty or a compact. We want authority transfers. And when I say authority transfers, our own education system. We want our own policing. We want our own criminal justice system, and we want it recognized within the Constitution. 59 trillion is the bill. We don't want any more than that, but 59 trillion is reasonable. In technology transfers, land, gold, all, we'll take it, because we just want a start. We don't want to be over anybody, but we want to be self-sufficient, because regardless of who's in the White House, we want to feel safe. We want to feel secure. We want our children educated. We want to live. That's reparations. No more, no less.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And last question I wanted to ask you, because actually two last questions I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned the assault that the U.S. government did in Philadelphia on MOVE, and this is this is a topical slash history program. Can you enlighten our audience on who were the people of MOVE? Why did the U.S. government assault these people? And then that kind of leads into Mumia Abu Jamal. And if you want to enlighten people on Mumia Abu Jamal and his case and why he should be free, go right ahead.
Well, okay. Well, basically, the MOVE group, they were African centered in culture. They embrace African culture, African values, and they live distinct from the rest of the neighborhood. And they had a lot of complaints on them because they had animals, whatever have you, and the neighbors did some complaining, but nothing that they did should have risen to the level of state-sponsored terrorism that they endured. It was a travesty of justice, and it was very poor judgment on the United States behalf. And
so they were just a community. So that's all they were. Nothing more, nothing less. Just a community of black people, and they were just like those sundown towns. They were just spontaneously just assaulted by the local government of Philadelphia.
Well, they were just assaulted because they were given citations. They were told to move, and they just wouldn't move or whatever have you. But it shouldn't have arrived. Nothing could justify a bomb being dropped on those people, all because they would not move, or their neighbors didn't like them, or somebody didn't like their culture. Again, they were African centered in an urban area. They would have fared better had they been in the South, in a rural area, but they were in an urban area trying to practice some of the African-centered values that they wanted to practice. And that didn't sit well with even some of the people in their neighborhood. So there was a lot of complaints made. And the local government gave them some directives about cleaning up the area, directives about doing this, doing that. And they felt like their rights were being violated and that they were being signaled out. And one thing led to the other. Bam, the bomb.
Wow.
And Mumia should be free. As a matter of fact, that is a part in our reparations. We are calling for the immediate release of all of our political prisoners. They should not even be here on the United States soil because they are political prisoners. There was nothing criminal that he did. As a matter of fact, based on my research, all of those charges were trumped up. And I don't know who his legal team is, but I don't know why they're not filing anything on his behalf to have him removed from the
yeah, and let me just interject. Mumia was actually a journalist. He was he worked for I think a major newspaper in Philadelphia. He covered the MOVE people and the assault on MOVE. He later was fired for exposing the human rights abuses and the police corruption and the trumped up charges on the MOVE people. And he later became an independent journalist. He was accused of murdering a police officer who was abusing his brother, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, he was accused of that.
Now, what happened? I've seen 3 or 4 documentaries on Mumia Abu Jamal, but they never mentioned what happened to his brother.
I don't know. I don't know what happened to his brother. But the last time I was looking at some things because I wanted to write Mumia. I'm not understanding what's bothering me about his whole case is why nothing has been filed internationally on his behalf to have him either a new trial or removed out of the jurisdiction of the United States. That's what is needed to be done with all of our political prisoners. An intervention needs to be filed in the Inter-American Court or either in the UN somewhere on their behalf and have them move to a neutral area where they can get care. A lot of our political prisoners have been in solitary confinement for up to 30 or 40 years with no human contact. That's a fact. So I don't know why the leadership or the people who are advocating for them are not filing anything on their behalf, because we have to remember that the United States is an offender. Therefore, you will not get justice domestically. It has to be taken to a neutral jurisdiction. And that's what's going to have to happen with Mumia.
Let's hope it happen. Let's hope it happens soon, because I know internationally there are a lot of people who express solidarity for Mumia Abu Jamal. I think Amnesty International has condemned his conditions, but yeah, it is a huge travesty of justice, the ongoing persecution of Mumia Abu Jamal, and heaven forbid if Julian Assange ever comes to the United States, it's going to be we're going to witness that tragedy all over again.
Exactly, and that's why we have to call on the international community to hold. No one has ever held the United States accountable for their human rights violations. They have weaponized humanitarian aid. They have invaded countries for what they're doing to Blacks and other nationalities here. How is it that the international community cannot hold the United States accountable? Where are their sanctions? Where's the United States sanctions? Who is going to sanction the United States? Because now the UN's credibility is on the line.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, definitely.
You have the Western Sahara tribe nation in Africa who actually got a favorable judgment in 1975 and is yet to be enforced. They're living in a desert ghetto. Okay? A desert ghetto. Meanwhile, European countries have circumvented their land rights, circumvented their property rights, circumvented their rights to their resources, but they're having to live off of aid, while all of their all of their resources and their wealth is being absorbed and misappropriated. The UN is complicit. So we're going to have a conversation with them. Now, if they can't get it together, then maybe we need to get together and form our own global entity.
Interesting. Well, on that note, yeah, it's an idea, and it's an idea, and it is something that we're definitely going to have to save for another conversation. That's alrighty. Well, we were joined on this incredible edition of 1+1 with Elaina Porter, who is a member of the Pendo Center for Human Rights and Self-Determination. Elaina, thank you so much for coming on the program. I hope this will be the first of many conversations. We're gonna have. I want to have a conversation with you off the air, but for now, thank you so much for joining me. This was an incredible late Black History Month special, and and thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
It was an honor.